Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Grumpy Penguin. Today we're going to work on my car, a 2004 Mazda Speed Miata. As you can see, this is a 2004 Mazda Speed Miata. This has been my car for several years before I had this channel, so it's already pretty extensively modified for kind of a mix of track and road use. It's got some coilovers on it, upgraded exhaust. It is, of course, the turbo model. I've gone ahead and done the standalone engine management system. It's been tuned by our friends at Pure Tuning. Makes just about 200 wheel horsepower, so it's pretty fun to drive, and it's great around an autocross course or a road racing track. And this is today's project. I've had this AiM dash kicking around for a couple of years in a box. It's time to put it to good use and install it in our Miata. Alright guys, the good news here is that the gauge cluster in the Miata is pretty easy to get out. Simply remove the 4 screws underneath here, pop the gauge bezel apart, and the gauge cluster becomes accessible. Now this isn't the first time I've had this out since I've added this handy boost gauge here, so this should be a pretty straightforward project. I start by fitting the blanking plate in place in the car. I then place the digital dash where I want it to be displayed and mark out roughly where it's going to go on the blanking plate. This will help later when we drill the holes in the back to feed the wiring harness through and set up the mounting screws. The nice part about this dash is it fits very nicely in the Miata cluster with lots of room to spare for extra accessories that we'll be adding later, like turning indicators, high beam indicators, and maybe an additional gauge. Using an angle grinder, I cut out the hole for the wiring harness and use a pneumatic sander to smooth out all the edges. This is what it looks like in place. Using a CAD template, I mark out where the holes need to be from the dash and transfer them to the blanking plate to be drilled. After placing the blanking plate on a piece of scrap wood, I bolt the whole mess down using one of the C-clamps that I fit into my welding kit. After the holes have been drilled and cleaned with the sander, we're going to do a test fitting of the digital dash. One of the features I really enjoy about this dash is that the mounting screws are mounted into kind of a rubber bushing in the back of the digital dash itself. This provides a lot of vibration reduction for cars that may have more solid mounts or just create a lot of vibration and noise on the track. My Miata doesn't have solid motor mounts, so this isn't a huge concern for me, but this can be for a lot of other people. As I had mentioned earlier in the video, I still use this car primarily on the street, so I wanted to have turning indicators and a high beam indicator incorporated into this dash build. I've sourced some turning indicators and a high beam indicator button from the internet, I didn't actually realize that the high beam indicator was a button until it arrived, so we'll see if we can't use that for some other feature later. However, for now we're just going to zip tie the additional button controls out of the way and focus on the light controls. After finishing crimping on the Deutsch male connector pins onto the harness, it's time to insert them into the plug and finish building the Deutsch connector plug. Now, if you've never used Deutsch connectors before, they are pretty serviceable and easy to build, which is why I chose them for this project. Simply insert the pin until you hear an audible click, and you're pretty much done. You do need to insert a wedge on the other side of the plug. Building the female side of the plug is pretty much the same. We'll build one out on the bench and then use it in the car here in just a little bit. We've gone ahead and created the female side of the plug. This will go ahead and splice into the dash cluster wiring with a little help from our wiring diagram to know what's what. At this point, it's usually helpful to go ahead and on the back of the pin, you'll see numbers, and it's just a good idea to write down the numbers and what they correspond to. So, left indicator, right indicator. I know this is going to be very controversial on the comments, but we are going to use these little, I call them vampire connectors. They're quick connects. The reason I'm doing this is they are virtually damage-free to the wiring in the car. That way, if we ever want to revert back to a stock cluster, we can simply take out this entire harness, and we don't have to worry about resoldering wires or splicing things open or depinning harnesses. It's just an easy way, a quick way to get into it and be done with it and create a nice transition harness for us. So we'll go ahead and get that installed, and we'll be pretty close to testing our whole setup here. All right, we got the dash done. Went ahead and gave it some color, just kind of an OEM black. And we got the dash mounted, turning indicators mounted, and we're ready to get it in the car and see how it looks. After getting all the wiring completed and hooked up, it should power right on and start up. Some configuration using a laptop will be required later on, but for now we're seeing good communication between the ECU and the dash. I'm also confirming that the turning indicators and high beam indicator work prior to calling this project a wrap. Be sure to check us out for our next project. Thanks for watching.